Get to Sarah Robinson. She's live at the Stafford fire right now, speaking with some of the first responders who were on the scene earlier this morning. So, Sarah, what are you learning from them?
Well, Larry, good afternoon to you. Yeah, we just spoke with Stafford County Fire a moment ago, and from that interview, you could really feel the weight of what happened. They said that this type of incident does not happen very often, but they said they were prepared and had crews ready to go. I believe she mentioned 11 crews in total, 11 ambulances in total responded to the scene. They mentioned there were multiple cars on fire when they got there. They had multiple crews working to get those fires under control. In addition to that, they had to get multiple patients out of the vehicles involved. In fact, some of those they mentioned having to use the jaws of life, having to extract patients. We also know that one of the victims was flown via helicopter to a trauma center in the area. They weren't able to answer specific questions as to the injuries or the deaths that occurred on scene. But as you mentioned, we do know there are 37 injuries. Right before we spoke with Stafford Fire, we actually were able to interview one of the people who were injured on the bus. He mentioned that this was a really chaotic scene. He was asleep when the crash itself happened, and as he woke up, the bus was going headfirst into the median or a ravine, he mentioned, and just not knowing exactly what was occurring, but knowing that he was really scared. He said he looked at the passengers that were around him on the bus. Many of them were pretty injured. He said he mentioned seeing a lot of blood and just being really confused at first as to what happened. Thankfully, his injuries were relatively minor to the others that he saw, and he was discharged from Stafford Hospital. That's where we spoke to him. But he mentioned just being overall really overwhelmed by this, but thankful that he is alive and doing well. So it's really hard to put into words the weight of the situation for so many people, but hopefully we learn more about the surviving victims, and hopefully we also learn more about the 5 people who lost their lives. Larry, I'll send it back to you.
Well, based on what you described, clearly what you are giving us is sort of the details about what for them was not only a horrific scene, but one that was very chaotic, very troublesome based on the things that they were encountering at the time, with multiple vehicles on fire as you described there. So it certainly gives you an indication of what they were up against and what they were trying to respond to in the early morning hours, a time in an area where we know we tend to see a lot of traffic making their way on 95, with a lot of folks traveling northbound to make their way toward the Capitol Beltway. I think a lot of people, Sarah, though, are left with this sort of lingering question about, now that the NTSB is involved, it really does speak to the seriousness of this investigation and the sort of impact that this has had on this community in particular. You know, one has to wonder, sort of based on the conversations that you've had with Stafford County Fire and Rescue, sort of what their role will be in this investigation as well. How are they working with and aiding the NTSB as they continue to figure out sort of what happened and sort of lead us on a timeline of events?
Yeah, well, right now they mentioned that the details they can share with us about the investigation itself is limited. Of course, that is because of the involvement with the NTSB, but we are hoping to hear from NTSB officials a little bit later today to maybe give a timeline as to when we will learn more about the driver and the moments that led up to this crash. But yes, definitely a very serious crash. Really hard to for the victim that we spoke to put into words the weight of what he saw. Again, you mentioned seeing those cars on fire. Yes, he did mention that he smelled smoke and that was really hard for him to grasp as well. But yeah, hopefully we will learn more about exactly what led up to the crash, because that is the one question that people are really asking and wondering what could have caused this, especially knowing that it was in a construction zone, 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Larry?
And as we heard from the audio tapes, people jumping out of their vehicles to try and protect themselves from what they were encountering at the time. Just horrifying details. Sarah Robinson, we appreciate the update. Thank you.